20 years ago, Mount Hope Bay was home to a thriving fishery that relied on winter flounder. The population of winter flounder in Mount Hope Bay has collapsed, but the advent of fishing restrictions and prospective improvements in water quality offer the potential for a recovery of this valuable species. How can this project be allowed to torpedo these efforts? No one knows for sure how severe the damage will be, but the project is not justified given unclear benefits and suitable alternatives. We ask you, our elected officials, to consider that 3 new regional LNG facilities are operational or near completion, and that our energy needs can be met without sacrificing the health of Narragansett Bay or our local economy to satisfy the distribution needs and profit objectives of a multinational oil company. In our view, the Hess project cannot be permitted under federal and state laws and regulations. We will make this case before the relevant federal agencies and will go to court if necessary. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I thank you very much, and I would actually ask you, I believe there were some of your comments were in written form, so if you would deliver those to our staff, I would appreciate it greatly. You know, and you mentioned the dollar amount being spent in certain remediations. I'm an attorney. I've represented a number of people, actually not recently, probably in the last 10 years, but I would say that number is dwarfed by the amount of money individual citizens who have coastal access have had to spend to make their properties in compliance with the laws and regulations that we have adopted to preserve that resource. And most of them have done so begrudgingly, but I will in fact say willingly, because they do recognize the value of being on a pristine bay, or at least on a clean bay. So again, thank you. Any questions? Senator Felag.
Basically 2 questions. I know there's a regional facility in Boston, but you mentioned 3 of them. Where are those 3 facilities?
Sure. There is there's been a LNG terminal in Everett, Mass., which is in Boston Harbor, in operation now for years, I think 40 years at least. That facility is capacity constrained. The owner of that facility, Suez Energy, is developing a buoy-based offshore terminal in Cape Cod Bay. It's 20 miles off the shore of Boston. It will tie into an existing pipeline, and it will do regasification, as Grover mentioned, on board the vessels. That facility is not operational. It was expected to be operational by the end of the year. We expect it to be taking its first delivery sometime in the first quarter of this year, so it's imminently operational. The other 2 that I mentioned, there is a huge facility in St. John, New Brunswick, developed by Canaport and Irving Oil, and that has a capacity that is almost 3 times the capacity of the Suez Boston Harbor facility. That is operational. It took its first LNG tanker delivery in June and feeds into the New England gas market through pipelines through northern New England. Again, that facility was built not to serve the energy needs of Halifax. That was built to serve the energy needs of New England and eastern Canada. The second that is operational was developed by Accelerate Energy. It is 12 miles off the coast of Gloucester. It is also a buoy-based system way out in the Atlantic Ocean, and it feeds directly into an existing gas pipeline. All 3 of those terminals were developed to serve the New England and specifically the Boston market, where much of the demand is.
And a follow-on question to the turbidity, I guess you call it, or the turbidity. I always look at it as a washing machine effect, and when I think of it in that terms, I think of it as moving parts. And when we talk about dredging, how long are those moving parts? In other words, the affected contaminated soil as it's being dredged reaches out into some distance, whether it be a quarter mile, a half a mile, or can you give us some kind of studies that you've done or something that would indicate what stretches we're talking about?
Well, you're going to test my abilities and my knowledge of dredging, the dredging process, and I know that suspended sediment from dredging operations do drift for long distances depending on the nature of the ocean floor that's being dredged. So I can't give you a precise answer. I know there are others in this room who can. The turbidity issue that I mentioned specifically related not to dredging, but to the actual operation of the vessels as they anchor at the terminal. It'll be basically a pile-driven platform. I think it's 8 or 10 stories high in the middle of Mount Hope Bay. There'll be tugboats that bring the vessels to the terminal, and the channel itself is very, very narrow. These ships are huge. They're up to 965 feet long. They're very wide, and they'll be escorted by tugs, which between the tug prop and the vessel props will stir up the water. And one of our concerns is, given the narrowness of the dredged channel, it will basically stir up shallow water. It's only 15 feet deep on the edge of the channel. So you've got a tremendous amount of thrust being generated by these vessels that we are concerned will stir up sediment that will smother fishing beds, which therefore extending the scope of the impact, the geography of the impact.
So basically that washing machine effect takes place on two different instances, one being the actual traversing of the cargo ship and the other being the actual dredging itself.
Right, exactly.
Because, you mentioned it's 3 million cubic yards, being one of the largest private projects within our state. And so that turbulence is going to be traveling for miles.
Right.
Just a quick question, and perhaps, I mean, we already have LNG tankers going up, smaller ones, probably escorted by tugs. So, and perhaps you indicated you're not perhaps the one to ask this, but if somebody could answer the question, is it a difference in degree or a difference in kind? Is this large boat really going to create a much larger displacement, or do the multiple smaller boats have any sort of similar effect? I don't need you to answer. You already indicated, but if somebody might be willing to address that. First, I'd like to go to Senator Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question has to do with the three alternatives or opportunities that we could use instead of. And you mentioned the facility in Everett, I guess owned by Suez.
Right, yes.
That they are building or expanding that facility out in the harbor somewhere, exactly nowhere. And then you mentioned the facility in New Brunswick, St. John's, I believe. And then you mentioned a facility off the coast, 12 miles or so, off the coast of Gloucester, which is to be ready pretty soon. Are you saying that there would be enough capacity in the expansion of one, the facility in St. John's in New Brunswick is supposed to be for New England as well as Canada? It just has not reached at all its capacity, so it would be available. And in addition, the one in Gloucester, the capacity would be there, not just for Massachusetts, but it's supposed to be for southern New England or other New England states as well.
Let me answer it this way. It's a great question. These three LNG terminals, two of which are now operating and taking deliveries of liquefied natural gas, that natural gas is destined for our market, for the Boston area, the New England market. That natural gas is the capacity that's represented by those three terminals, three new terminals, not this existing one, but the three new ones, will give New England, by one study that we've seen, an independent energy expert study, it will give the region for the next 30 years 30% more capacity, import capacity, than is required. So these three facilities, which are already permitted, already licensed, two of which are operational, two of which are taking deliveries, and the third will be operational imminently, have sufficient capacity to meet the region's energy needs, natural gas needs. I might just add on one other score that you may be familiar with the news in the paper about natural gas discoveries in New York State and Pennsylvania. There are some significant new natural gas discoveries, domestic discoveries, that will also flow into New England through the existing pipeline architecture.